I'm really in fear. I'm in fear for my life. I think things are going to elevate. He sent me over 100 messages today. I'm in fear. I don't know what to do. Please help. Even when I changed phones, he would find me. I felt like there was no way of ever having a normal life again. I felt like I was going to be in fear even if he went to prison, because he would find me.
Debra Newell is a successful Orange County interior designer and divorced mom of 4.
In 2014, she met a man online named John Meehan, who immediately swept her off her feet.
They married soon after, and that's where her nightmare began. I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula.
On today's episode of Strictly Stalking, we sit down with Debra Newell.
Her life is the basis for the true crime podcast and Bravo TV series Dirty John.
Debra, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Debra, tell us about your life.
What part?
Well, that's a good question. That is a very open question. Well, basically, tell us what your life was like before 2014.
Before 2014, I have a very successful business, interior design business. And I think at the time, approximately 30, 40 employees doing work at one point all over the world. And in the during that time frame, just the Western states, basically. Kids were raised. I have 4.
Oh, wow.
A boy and 3 girls. And they were all either in their 30s or 20s. And I've been single a lot through raising my kids. And I felt like at this point in my life, it was time for me.
When did you start online dating?
I started online dating, a week before I met John. Or before I came in contact with John, yeah.
Really? What site did you meet him on?
Our Time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he's one of the first, huh?
He was the 6th.
Oh, move quickly.
Yeah.
I like that.
The 6th one you met in person, or was it the 6th, like how did you respond?
Well, what happened was you get numerous people, and I'd look at their profile. I went down, very few did I accept, but I think out of 82 or 84, I can't remember exactly, 5 were interesting. So I went on a first date with each one of those 5, not interested whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. And so a couple nice guys, but there was no chemistry. And some looked nothing like their profile. And then all of a sudden I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go off this. This is just not my thing. And up popped John.
What was it about him that attracted you?
Several things, actually. He had pictures of his dogs, and I'm a dog lover. He had photos of his daughters, and because I have 3 daughters, that meant a lot to me. He would be able to relate to raising daughters. He was successful, supposedly, in the medical field, and nice looking, Christian, because I go to church, so on. So he tended to be everything that I was looking for, supposedly.
So you had a great profile then.
He did.
What was it like the first time you met him in person?
Well, the first time I met him, I was living in this penthouse, and Jacqueline, my middle daughter, was living there somewhat part-time. And so she was home that day, and I was still getting ready. I'd just come home from work and was trying to hurry. And so there's a guard gate, then there's a concierge, and then you have to have a key fob to go upstairs. So it's pretty safe where I was living. So I ended up saying, go ahead and let him come upstairs while I was still getting ready. Anyway, he came up, and he looked younger than he was. So I wasn't sure he was telling the truth about his age, because he looked to be in his, I'm going to say late 40s.
And how old did you think that he was?
I believe at the time 52 or 54.
So what was your first date like?
Well, it started out great. We went over to Houston's, which is a restaurant nearby, sat down, and a lot of questions, which was unusual. I felt like the other guys, all they did was talk about themselves, and I felt like the conversation went back and forth quite well. He seemed intelligent. He was funny, and I love funny. He was inquisitive. He tended to answer everything right. Like when I asked about his girls, he went on and on about how much he loved them, how involved he was in their lives. He talked about his job, going over to Iraq, working with Doctor Without Borders. So I thought, wow, that's a great thing that he was doing. So we talked, I'm going to say between 3.5 hours. And he seemed very trustworthy, everything about him. So I said, come back for a nightcap at my house. I went to go use the restroom. And when I came back out, he was on my bed. And I said, nope, get off my bed. You're not going to be on my bed.
Yeah, that's a little quick.
Yeah, this is not my thing.
No.
And kicked him out, and he was very angry about that. He just sort of stomped out, didn't say a word. And I thought, walked into work the next day, and I told my daughter, well, I thought I had a really good one, and it turned out, pretty bad.
Is that the first sign that you saw, like, okay, this guy has a temper, this guy is...
Yes. Yeah. I'm thinking to myself, wow, he gets that upset. Where's the respect for me? Yeah. But then he calls the next day, and he apologizes, said, I am so, so sorry. I just didn't want that date to end. Everything about you I loved. He went on. He's a con man. Mm-hmm. And who I am, I'm like, okay, I'll give you a second chance. And so from that point forward, he would open the door, walk on the outside, pay for every check. I mean, he was doing everything right. So, and then it moves pretty quickly. It was a whirlwind. Anything that happened that I would even question, he had an excuse for it. And it was good. It was very believable.
What types of things were you questioning?
Well, he didn't have a car. He showed up in a rental car. And so I said, oh, where's your car? He's successful. He said, well, when he was in Iraq, all his belongings got stolen, including his cars. Not just one car, but cars. Showed me pictures of his cars. And he showed me the State Farm. At one point, he showed me his State Farm claim about losing everything, someone coming in and stealing everything. So it was fairly believable, And so I let him, instead of him using a rental car all the time, I said, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and use one of my cars? And so I let him use one of my cars.
How long did it take from when you knew him to when he was driving your car?
3 weeks to a month.
How quickly did you go from the whirlwind romance to proposal?
Quickly. Too quickly. He was telling me it was love at first sight. And he kept telling me I'm everything he'd been looking for. He hadn't been married in 16 years. And he said he fell in love. And so he said, I just don't want to live without you. You're everything that I could ever ask for and more. And he would tell me all the time, I make him a better man. Now I get it.
Right.
But it moved way too quickly, and I kept telling him, slow down, cowboy. Just slow down.
What was the proposal like?
Well, there was never an actual proposal. What he would do is every day, marry me, marry me, marry me, marry me. I'd be like, oh my gosh, you're driving me nuts. I said, not yet, in big bold letters. I'm not willing to marry you yet. So this would happen several times a day. It felt good. Here's this very attractive man, looks like he has it all, coming on very strong. So part of me was flattered. Part of me was scared. But I think overall, it just felt good because I was falling for him too.
And how quickly did he move in?
You know, it's really hard to say because he didn't have much. So I moved out and moved down to the beach, lived on Balboa Island, and got a house right, looking at the water. And so he was helping me move in and brought a few things down there. Little did I know that I think it's all he had because he'd been in prison.
Was it his idea for you to move?
It was partially his idea, but I've always wanted to live on the beach or on water. And so I thought, well, this is my time. I think it'll be really fun to live down and go home every day and just enjoy being on the beach.
When did you tell your kids that you had met this amazing man?
Well, I told them right away. Yeah, I told them, I think within a date or two. Well, I told my oldest daughter after the first date. They thought, wow, Mom, you go, girl.
Yeah, supportive of this guy.
What were their initial thoughts of John?
Well, none of them liked him. My oldest said that he didn't look her in the eye, but she was more private about it. Jacqueline was very vocal about it and did not like him in the least bit immediately, but she has always been harder on anyone I've tried to date or, And then Terra came in, I believe it was right before Thanksgiving. And that didn't go well, and that really made me sad because Tara's pretty easygoing and awfully sweet. That how can someone not like her, if that makes sense?
How did that Thanksgiving argument with Terra go down in your eyes?
Well, I think we have two different perspectives. And I think when you're on the inside, you're not going to see what's happening on the outside. Exactly. And so with what Terra was experiencing was the opposite of what I was experiencing. So when she was very upset because she had seen some of John's things in my house. And John, what I remember, and we talked about this a little bit today. Tara's here, right? What I saw was him saying, "Hey, don't yell at your mom." That's what I was hearing, because she was upset that he had some of my stuff there. But I was so disappointed because I just really wanted them to like each other.
What was the next steps, I guess, that he took to isolate you from the rest of the family?
So what was really hard for me and what started happening was John would talk negatively about my family and about my friends. Say, oh, they want you for your money, or they're using you, or you need better boundaries, which is true. I do need better boundaries because I am a very sure whatever you want. I'm a giver. And that is one of my challenges, and I had been going to therapy for that, having boundaries. So what happened was when John didn't like my kids, and I think they're so, I think they're great.
Of course.
So I'm thinking, wow, how do you not like my kids? They're pretty fun. I think I kept thinking, okay, they'll all like each other eventually. They just are very protective of their mom, and we got off to a bad start. So I believe that I was hoping that things would change, but they didn't. It's interesting, but when you're with a con man or a psychopath, they are so good at what they do that I think I'm a fairly intelligent person. And I would walk away, my gut would tell me something, but he would convince me that everything's going to be okay. They're going to come around. Everything, as far as my kids were concerned, he did see them taking advantage of me, and he kept saying, "You need better boundaries." So there was a lot going on in my head, I saw some red flags, but I wanted to ignore them because I was falling for him.
Were you hiding parts of your relationship from your family at this point?
Not at that point, no. But I did marry John way too soon, and I hid that from them.
How did that come about? The actual marrying him, hiding it. What happened there?
So I had to go to Vegas for work, and we were staying in this hotel, and John would do his own thing all day, and I would go off to work, obviously. And so he had been bugging me and bugging me and bugging me, like I was telling you about getting married. And I think we'd gone out for a drink and dinner and ended up going over to the courthouse. He had done some stuff during that day and went to the courthouse, and I said, okay, let's do it. But nobody needs to know about this. And so we tied the knot.
When did you tell your kids that you had gotten married?
Well, I hadn't. John and my nephew had a texting war going on. John was terrible. And he said, don't call my wife. And my nephew said something to the degree, God forbid she married you. Please don't let that be true. And so that my kids came to me and I said, yes, I had married him.
How did they react?
Oh, not very happy. Yeah, pretty upset.
Financially, what was he doing to get by? Was he basically asking you for money? Was there any sort of financial? He was just completely independent as far as you knew.
He did not ask me for a penny, and he paid for every date.
Do you know how he was getting that money?
Absolutely no idea. Yeah. There could have been, I've always carried a lot of cash, I'll be honest with you. And he could have grabbed a little bit out of my purse and I would never know it. He could have been selling drugs, like prescription drugs, because he had quite a few. So I'll never know. He also was getting a check, I find out later. And he was getting a certain amount a month from Medicare, Medi-Cal, one of those, every month.
When did you start seeing that he wasn't the person that you thought he was?
Well, I think I ignored some of the flags, obviously. But probably the breaking point was this letter in the mail that was from jail. And it was addressed to him, and I opened it. It was some guy that stated that he was really happy that John's life had turned around and that he was doing well and that he had met the love of his life. And I'm thinking that his life turned around. This is from jail. And I realized something was going on. Well, John, this was the beginning of the end, and what happened is he grabbed the letter from me so quickly, he just overreacted and said, "You're committing a felony." And I said, "Well, what is this?" And he said, "Wait, you're committing a felony. Don't you realize I could have you arrested?" So he turned it around on me. Mm-hmm. There were other things about how he was behaving with my kids. Every time we go out, I felt like he was isolating me, talking about, I have a daughter and daughter-in-law that owned part of the company, and he kept saying, "Why are they owners? Why don't you own this? They're just taking advantage. You've built this company," so on and so forth. And my daughter is my oldest daughter is an incredible person, hardworking, talented. I mean, I can't say enough great things about her. And he was saying that she's taken advantage, and I knew that wasn't true. So there was a lot of him manipulating, and then that letter, and then how he was isolating me from friends and family that I started to see.
When did you realize that his financial situation wasn't what you thought?
Well, At one point, I said, we were at the house, I think it might have been February, I'm not quite sure the timing, but it had been a few months at the beach house. I said to him, why don't you help with the rent? And he looked at me and he said, I'd love to, but I have I think he said he had $900,000 in a trust for his kids. And I'm thinking, wow, he must really love his kids. But he puts everything into it. And I let it go because I was doing quite well. It didn't matter to me that much. But I noticed at that point that something's up.
Did you meet the kids? Did you wonder where they were?
Well, what's interesting about John, didn't meet the kids, but a couple weekends he said he had to go away because he was with the kids. And so he was showing me pictures of one of his youngest daughter, he and his youngest daughter shopping, but it would be a picture of her with a bunch of bags. So I find out later he was getting those off Facebook. Okay. And then pretending like he was out shopping with her. And then another time he has a picture of his daughter in an airplane. And so he was literally showing me everything on Facebook or Instagram or whatever they're on and pretending like he was with them.
Did you meet anyone from his family?
Well, John told me that his mom and dad had died of cancer, and he had one sister that had died of cancer. He has two, but he didn't tell me that. And then a brother that committed suicide. So he said he had no one except his kids.
So he had an excuse basically for everything.
John had a great creative answer for everything. It was amazing. He would even elaborate on it. And the war stories about him being in Iraq, and obviously he wasn't, were amazing. He had a long scar on his stomach, which a lot of people don't know this, but he was addicted to drugs. And when he was in jail, he opened up his stomach like 10, 12 inches and put feces in it. Yeah.
Wow.
So he could go to the hospital. And so I have a picture of that complete opening. It's so strange.
Oh,
so
really...
it's awful. But the one thing about John is he really did have an answer for everything, that he was very believable. He had convinced lawyers, therapists, I'm sure many people out there.
When did you find out that your kids had hired a private investigator and that they were moving forward to help end your relationship?
The beginning of March. And what happened was I had gotten that letter, I think the 1st or 2nd of March, and everything started to unfold on the 5th of March. And at the same time, John had a bowel obstruction, and I was in an argument with him over everything that was going on. Because it was all unfolding at that point. And he had to rush himself to the hospital. We were in a fight. And I went the next morning, I think it was the 6th of March, and I grabbed his phone because he was very out of it on drugs. And I started looking at his phone. And I saw women on there. I saw phone numbers. Even saw one phone number to my daughter, Jacqueline. And so I realized at that point, this man's a fraud. And I had so much guilt. What have I done? How could I believe this man? All of a sudden, everything had unfolded, and it was a disaster.
Were you part of hiring the private investigator at all?
Well, it just happened to be right at that time they came to me and they said he's not who he says he is at all. And I think my nephew said, what if John was in jail and not in Iraq? And I remember thinking to myself, well, I can't trust him, and how do you have a relationship without trust? And there were a lot of things going through my mind. I was in shock. I was from shock to denial to angry to hurt to guilt. You have so much guilt. How could I do this? How could I not listen to the people that mean the most to me, my kids? So you go through a lot.
I can imagine. When you decided to leave him, how did he take it?
Well, John was in the hospital for 23 days. So I think on day 3, my kids came over and my nephew, and they packed me up. And they got everything of mine out of the house, took everything of John's, and put it in the garage, which was not much. And then I went and hired a lawyer to file an annulment. I wanted to know more about John. So during this time frame, I'm in shock. Again, you go through every emotion. And I was scared also. I thought, what is he capable of? I think I stayed with my daughter, and then I also traveled around with my business and was somewhat in hiding during this time frame. And I was trying to read anything I could on John. And he was in there for 23 days. And then after 21 days, he called and he said, "You're all I have." And I'm in one of those empaths or whatever. And I have MS, and I'll explain everything, but I've been the victim. I've been framed. And if you look at all the paperwork, it's not my name. It's John Meehan, John Mohan, John, all these, they used like 16 different names to look up John. And he said, if you'll notice some of those restraining orders, because he says, I know everything that you're talking about. He goes, you'll notice that I've been framed. And you'll notice that some of the guys that they're describing are not me. Red hair, 6 foot, green eye or blue eyes. And John was brown hair, 6'2", green eyes. And so, he was, again, very believable. But so at this point, I have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. So I said, I don't trust you, and that's a big deal to me. But I'm going to put you in a hotel. I put him up in a hotel while he recovered. And he had taken me to a lawyer, and the lawyer told me his name was Stewart. Lawyer said, yeah, John's been the victim.
Was that confirmation for you that there was something, shady going on that you didn't know about?
Well, I was convinced that he was a terrible person. I'd had 21 days, 23 days to read everything. But then John, again, being so good as a con artist, he's telling me that he's the one that's been framed. He's been the victim. He could prove it to me. The lawyer could prove it to me. So here he is. I have this lawyer telling me I could prove it. We'll do a post-nup. We'll convince your kids. He said he'd do everything to win my kids over. He'll explain everything. He has MS. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. Now I'm really confused. Well, one thing that you don't do with someone that you're not quite sure how dangerous they are, you don't just walk away without a plan. So eventually, I think it was about June, I ended up letting John move into my place with me doing research, trying to figure everything out, how I'm going to go about it. So I was so mixed. I'd go home at night and I'd walk in and I felt myself shaking. Oh my gosh, what am I walking into? What am I doing? I don't even know who this man is. And what's real, what's not real. I felt like, am I going to walk into him being completely drugged out? Am I going to walk, because I'd read all about the drugs, am I going to walk into him with a girl because I heard he was a womanizer? Am I going to walk into him losing it? I had no idea. But I had to fake it. I didn't want anyone to worry about me. So I had to pretend like it was great. But during this time frame, I sort of put a plan together towards right when I was almost going to leave. I had hired a private investigator and a forensic psychologist that could sort of tell me who John was. At this point, I was told he was a narcissistic sociopath predator. And so they were teaching me what to say to him, what to do, and then the plan of getting away, because when you leave is when it's the most dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So what was happening at this point is he knew all my passwords, he knew my bank accounts, he had cameras in the house, he had cameras in the car, he could see me wherever I was going, and in my office. So I had 2 phones. I'd leave one at the office if I wanted to go see my kids. I tried to have him take the car that had the
GPS.
Yeah, in it, to where I could see if he was near me, or watching me. I was able to log on and get on my phone to be able to watch him if he was at the house. So I was trying to almost one-up him, if that makes sense. And I also, he had made some comments about my kids, that if I ever saw him, he would he would literally kill him. And so I felt like, okay, I could die, but I'd much rather me die than living with the fact that one of my kids died.
Of course.
And so you stay with them also from that standpoint until you really have a solid plan. And then he obviously had money of mine and pretty much knew everything about me. And so about once a week, I was changing a password. And my paychecks, I was cashing them, opposed to putting the money in the bank so he could see the money going in the bank. And I was giving that to 2 of my daughters, and then also a safety deposit box, because I had a plan of escaping and going into hiding.
And your kids were in on the plan?
Not yet.
Oh.
Yeah, this went on for a few months.
How did you know what plan to put together?
Well, you have to educate yourself on who this person really is, what he's capable of. And obviously working with a forensic psychiatrist or a psychologist, and this other guy that had been private investigator, but he'd been a bodyguard to 4 presidents. So he was pretty high powered, and they were good. But the one thing that one of the guys told me is, don't worry about your kids. He's after you because he doesn't have anything to lose with your kids, but he has a lot to lose with you. Okay? He's angry with you. So at this point, I wasn't in as much fear for my kids at one point. I was early on when he made those comments, but then it was sort of turned around. The one thing that started happening with John is I started noticing the red flags. I noticed the inconsistencies in what he was saying to me. And I noticed there weren't a lot of friends. I noticed the drugs. I noticed him being high a lot. There were things that all of a sudden I was looking at him through different glasses. But the one thing I tried to do, I went to 4 police stations. And I said, here's who this guy is, help me. Can you get him arrested? Can you do anything? Can I get a restraining order? 4 police stations told me no. One looked at me, it was Irvine. There was this guy, sat there almost 4 hours, 3.5, 4 hours. And he said to me, go home.
Go home?
Yeah. You don't have a mark on you.
Sure.
And there's no direct threat of him killing me. There would be comments like, I have a really bad feeling about you. I hope you went to church today. Weird threats. But anyway, what happened was, at this point, I went into hiding because John discovered that I had pulled $30,000 out of one of my accounts. And it all blew up. And I was days away from leaving, a few days away from being completely ready to go into hiding. Because you have to prepare in every way. My business, I had to know that I couldn't go into my business, and who knows for how long, months, who knows. I had to have enough money. I had to have a plan. I had to make sure that I didn't stay at the same places, visit anything near what I was doing before. You change your whole lifestyle. I had to get a rental car. I had to have different credit cards, not in my name. You just have to do a lot of things to change your life. And so one day when I came home and he had discovered the $30,000, that's when I fled as fast as I could.
How did you find out that he was stalking Terra?
I wasn't even worried about Terra because I don't recall him even really having a problem with Terra. He had a problem with 2 of my other kids and my nephew and my son-in-law. So she was the one that I was probably the least concerned about. But even the forensic psychologist told me that I'm the one that should be in fear. Because if he kills my kids, he's not going to get money. He's going to go to jail. If he kills me, and we're still married, but nobody knows that he's killed me, he gets my money, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And it's me that he's angry with. Little did I know that his family's part of mafia, where you go after the person that you love the most, which is their kids. But I didn't know that. So anyway, I'm in hiding. I'm wearing dark wigs. I'm literally, and he's doing things. At the time I had 2 cars, and I'd left one at the office, and I'd left another one at a police station. And what was happening was he came one time and lit my car on fire. He was posting nude photos of me and sending them. He was doing everything, and he kept saying he would destroy me and everything around me, that this is bigger than me. He was doing Yelp reviews. I can't begin to tell you the things he was doing, the threats, and he would find me almost every time. Even when I changed phones, he would find me. So I felt like there was no way of ever having a normal life again. I felt like I was going to be in fear even if he went to prison. I thought I would be in fear the rest of my life because he would find me. And so what ended up happening was, I think I got a little, probably I wasn't staying under the radar as much as I should be at one point. I got an apartment with Jacqueline. But just to get to our apartment, there was the guard gate. Then there was the guard. Then there were 6 cameras. I think I counted 6 cameras to our apartment. So I felt somewhat safe, especially if I had an Uber driver drive me inside the gate and drop me off. Mm-hmm. So I was feeling pretty safe at that point. And there were a couple times where people saw him by my work, saw him. I gone to Big Canyon one day to drop my granddaughter off, and he said, "What, you have a boyfriend?" He kept accusing me of having a boyfriend, but he would find me all the time and call me or write letters. He started writing letters to my work when at times when he couldn't find my phone. So it was pretty scary.
What was the time frame from when you left him to when everything happened with Terra?
7 months.
So you were in hiding for 7 months. Mm-hmm. And then what was that day like for you?
2 things happened that day. One of them was there was one guy, we were trying to get John arrested. And the first time I gone to court to get a restraining order, it got denied, believe it or not. So what happened was that day there was one guy that was a detective that was working on the car and wanted to arrest him because of the car being on fire. And so I sent him an email that day, and I said, "Please help me. I'm really in fear. I'm in fear for my life. I think things are going to elevate. He sent me over 100 messages today. I'm in fear. I don't know what to do. Please help. Didn't get a response. I also was in a car with my girlfriend, and I said, even if John goes to prison or jail, I will still be in fear the rest of my life, because he had put out 2 hits on detectives while he was in jail.
Wow.
So I thought he's got to know a lot of bad guys, and so I still felt that I would be in fear. And then I get this call at 5:30. Obviously, you go through every emotion, from guilt to, oh my gosh, that's my child, to panic. I mean, you go through hysterics, you go through everything. And I don't even remember getting myself from where I was at to the crime scene. But I just remember being there and wanting to go to her, and I couldn't get to her because they have the yellow tape. And I remember thinking to myself, she's my daughter. She needs me, you know. And they wouldn't let me go to her. And that was, I mean, I can't begin to tell you the emotions you go through.
When did you learn that John was dead?
Well, we were getting mixed messages. The one police officer said it was a DOA, dead on arrival, and yet they wanted me to come to the other hospital and identify him, and because he was known as John Doe. And so I couldn't get to Terra. Obviously, that was by far my first concern, was her safety. And they said I wouldn't be able to see her for hours and hours. I think I saw her at 11 p.m. by the time they allowed us to see her. And so I had to go over and identify John. And I remember the detective saying that he is brain dead. He's had many strokes in the brain because of the way that knife went into his eye. And I'm thinking, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
He can't hurt us again or anyone else.
Absolutely.
And you go through, again, you go through so many emotions, but I was just so grateful that he was gone.
Yeah.
And that he couldn't get up and hurt another soul.
Have you had to change your life because of this?
Well, one thing that I thought was really important through all this is a couple of my girlfriends dated and got scammed. And I thought, wow, this is not uncommon. And so before I even talked to a reporter, I really had to analyze what I should do. I'd never gotten to the degree of anyone like this in my life. I've had some bad experiences, but not to this degree. And I had to sit there and think, wow, it's such a different world out there than when I dated. When I first started dating, you don't meet the person at their house. I mean, at your house. You don't give up any information until you do a background check. I mean, there's so many things that you do differently than what I did back in the day when I first started dating.
Yeah.
It's a whole different world. And so the one thing that was really important to me was educating myself and then educating my friends. And learning red flags was really, really essential. And then it got to a point, and I had a lot of guilt over what had happened with Terra, and I was in shock for a while. I think I walked around like a zombie. Mm-hmm. I was so in my head that I couldn't think of anything except, oh my gosh, why didn't I look at the red flags? Why didn't I do this? I was blaming myself a lot, especially the first 6 months. And then I thought to myself, I'm going to talk to a reporter. Because if this happened to me, it could happen to anyone else. Because I think I'm a very smart woman. And I thought, you know what? If I change one life, it's worth it. And so it became my passion to be there for other women.
What advice do you give other women? What are some of those red flags?
Well, first of all, never jump. I won't do a dating website, and I recommend people not to do a dating website because I think there are a lot of sociopaths on a dating website. They figure they could play the game and look up the person and so on. The one thing before you even go on a date is look them up. It's not always completely accurate because some people have hidden under the radar, but it's a start. Secondly, if you're going to go date someone, meet in a place that's lit up, a lot of people. I mean, make sure you're safe where you're going to meet the person. Move slowly, like very slowly. Get to know their friends, get to know their family. Sort of check them out. It's a whole different game than it was when I was younger. The red flags are when they're not telling the truth and you can sort of tell. Go with your gut. I think your gut tells a lot of the story. Don't fall with your heart, which is what I did. Mm-hmm. And I also feel there's a lot of men out there. The one thing that's really important to me and what happened to me is called coercive control. And it's where you don't get a mark on you until you leave, but it's the love bombing, and then it's the gaslighting, the isolating, the manipulation. So I learned all those terminologies as far as love bombing, gaslighting, so on and so forth. And so, again, educating yourself and really know what you're dealing with and to know the red flags are essential. It's not until you really process, get through the grieving and everything else that you understand what just happened to you. You can't judge anyone if they haven't been in your shoes. And there was a lot of judgment. A lot. And I'm not saying I did everything right by all means, because I know I did things wrong, obviously. But in hindsight, the only reason I went on the dating website to begin with was to find love.
Sounds like what you're doing now with your life is you're able to help people who are in these situations or how to help them avoid those situations.
Keep in mind, I'm lucky.
Absolutely.
I am extremely lucky for more reasons than one, but one of them is I had the money to be able to go into hiding. Most women don't.
Great point.
Yeah, they're stuck. I went back with him, but I went back with not because I felt like I wanted to go back with him, but there's a lot more to it why you go back. But there's an average of 7 times that it takes a woman to leave. They go back 7 times. Yeah. So I was ahead of the curve. And the other thing that's so important for me is I had up to 600 women reaching out to me at one point when the story came out on, I think it might have been the podcast. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And I think it just recently, 5 women a day. It was 4, now it's 5 women a day in America alone are murdered by their significant other. So it's crazy, so if we can educate women, help them. I mean, some are men, don't get me wrong, but the majority are women. But if there's anything that we can do to help women and have a voice for them, let them know they're not alone and give them pointers of what to do, I mean, that it's worth it.
Do you answer all the emails or all the ones you can?
I'd say I try to answer every single one of them. There's one woman in Wisconsin right now that was abused by her stalker. And she killed him, and she's in prison for life. And so my goal is to try to get her out. I have women all the time they don't know what to do. They don't have the funds. They don't know they have no support anywhere. So I think that's really important.
If somebody doesn't have the funds to be able to do this, what would be some of the things that you might be able to offer in terms of advice?
I tell them to look up and see if there's a shelter in their area. I tell them to document everything. Absolutely everything you can possibly do. Document it. Don't isolate yourself. Try to find a friend. Try to find somebody, and keep them part of your life. I tell others that are not part of this but have a friend, stay in their lives. Do not leave them. Don't feel like they're all alone. So there is a lot that we can do.
What advice would you give people, like friends of people going through this like right now?
Don't judge them. They need you. They need you more than ever. So be there for them. Try to find somebody to help them. Find the shelters if they're not having the capabilities, because they've either had their, if the guy is watching them, he'll make sure they're not online doing something. So help them from that standpoint. Find a place for them.
How do you approach relationships now?
Well, I waited almost 3 years before I even thought about dating again. And because I didn't want to make the same mistakes. And I do not have a good track record, I'll be honest with you. And so obviously I needed to figure it out. So I'm now dating somebody very seriously, and he is amazing.
Congratulations.
My kids love him.
That's step number one.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. I really lucked out this time. But the one thing that made a difference for me is I wouldn't even go on that first date until I checked him out. And I called Jacqueline. I said, Jacqueline, check this guy out. And then letting him get to know my kids, moving slowly, really getting to know him before we get physical, I thought was really important. I didn't want that to interfere with who this guy was and if we work. So.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Incredible.
Thanks.
Yeah, from that standpoint. Debra, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
If anyone out there is in need of help or is a victim of stalking, please reach out. You can find a list of resources on our Instagram at Strictly Stalking Pod.
I'm Jake Deptula.
And I'm Jamie Beebe. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Strictly Stalking.